Hey guys, Spirit of the Lie here. In this video, we're going to be talking about the massive upcoming patch, which we now have a preview for. It was teased as the biggest AoE2 patch ever, and it certainly doesn't disappoint in sheer size. In fact, it's big enough I don't want to get too bogged down in every detail in this video, especially since we don't have an official list of changes, and it's technically still just a beta. Anyone owning the game on Steam can opt into it though if you use the code shown here, though in a few weeks I expect this will be live for everyone. Instead, in this video, I just want to talk about the highlights and things that jumped out to me as the most interesting or significant. We'll jump right in with the brand new infantry tech coming to the game called Gambesons. This tech increases the pierce armor of the militia line specifically by 1 and is available in the Castle Age. About half of civilizations get it, including some good swordsman line civs like Japanese, Celts, Slavs, Teutons, Malay, and Bulgarians. On the other hand, there's a few notable exceptions who don't get it, like Malians, who already have lots of pierce armor on their militia line, and the Goths. Given this comes in Castle Age, it seems like another attempt to make long swordsmen more viable in Castle Age, and two-handed swordsman or champion being made more resistant to archers and defenses in the late game. In addition, the long swordsman, two-handed swordsman, and champion techs, as well as supplies, have also been made a bit faster to tech into, saving about a combined minute in research time. The next notable change is to the elite Steppe Lancer, which is getting another pierce armor on its elite version. That brings them up to the same as a Cavalier and just one behind a Paladin, and especially for late game raids, that one pierce armor should let them take a quarter more arrows from town centers, and just generally be more annoying. Now there was also a large number of cost reshufflings, notably including a discount in faster research time for pikemen, eagles are 5 food more expensive than they were before, and elite elephant archers and heavy scorpion are now cheaper to tech into. I don't think memorizing all these costs is critical, but it's just to highlight that these are the units the devs are trying to either discourage or encourage a bit more. But now let's take a look at some civilization-specific overhauls, with some getting either brand new unique techs or brand new bonuses. Again, I'm going to skip a handful that are just changes to tech costs, and I'm going to be sticking with the most interesting ones. Starting with the Bengalis, they're getting a new civ bonus giving their cavalry +2 attack against skirmishers. This is a pretty transparent buff for their chariot unique unit, whose largest weakness so far has been that it takes bonus damage as if it's a cavalry archer from skirmishers. And while that's still true, they now hit back a bit harder. The problem is it's just in melee mode when they get this benefit, and instead I think the sneaky winner here might be their scout cavalry, where adding just a couple of scouts to your archers will make for a big threat against enemy counter skirmishers. Next up for the Berbers, this is just a small change, but their 10% faster movement bonus has been reduced to +5% in Dark Age. This means they're not quite as safe when luring boar, so you have to be a little bit more careful with them than you were before. Moving on to Bohemians, their Hussite reforms unique tech, letting their monks only cost food, was brought way down in price, from 800 to 500 food. I don't want to get too hung up on cost changes here, but this one stood out to me as encouraging that tech significantly more. Next up for Britons, I'm really not sure I like this one, but their team bonus was reduced from 20% faster archery ranges to just +10%. Personally, I think this might be a slight overreaction to a growing perception they're too strong on team games. Personally, I've never seen them much better than a fringe top 10 team civ in the stats, and in fact Mayans have consistently a much higher team game win rate. Remember, this is also going to hurt Britons in 1v1 games, where they're very popular but are again below average in performance. Of course, we are only talking about roughly 3 extra seconds per archer or crossbowman, so I won't overreact and we'll just wait and see what effect this ends up having. Moving on now to Burgundians, they got several changes, the first of which is their controversial unique tech Flemish Revolution is having its cost change from 1200 food and 650 gold to a different cost model entirely. Now it's a flat 200 food and 150 gold plus 10 food and 5 gold for each villager. That means it ends up having the same cost if you have 100 villagers as before, but is now cheaper if you have fewer, but up to 2200 food and 1150 gold if you're fully boomed with 200 villagers. This alone could be considered a nerf, but the Flemish militia themselves also drop from 75 to 60 HP, 12 to 11 attack, and lose 1 pierce armor. Another small change is that after getting the tech, you can train additional Flemish militia at the barracks now instead of the town center for a bit cheaper cost. Next up for the Byzantines, an interesting change coming for them is that their Greek fire unique tech, in addition to helping your fire ships as always, also gives a bit of blast damage to their bombard towers. Personally, I like this idea, as it means it's not completely useless on land maps, and in fact, I wouldn't be opposed to all water-specific unique techs giving at least some small land bonus in addition. Another civilization getting a bit of an overhaul to a unique tech is the Celts. Their unique tech stronghold is being changed from 25% faster firing castles and towers to 33% now, and in addition also creates a healing zone for infantry and allied infantry around Celt castles. This one's hard to predict, as infantry is a very broad group, helping out pikes or longswords with siege or woad raiders, plus any allied infantry. It certainly makes a forward castle feel especially handy, and the healing rate seems to be about 30 HP per minute, which isn't bad, though at the moment it seems to stack with multiple castles, and I highly suspect that's going to be patched out pretty quickly. Next up, for the Chinese, they're getting a big change, which is no longer starting with +3 villagers, but instead just +2, being refunded 50 food. This obviously makes them feel more standard, as you can at least queue a villager to begin the game, and you have fewer villagers to deal with initially. Personally, I hate to see civilizations becoming more generic when there's already 42 of them, and I have doubts this is even going to accomplish what they're trying to do with it. We'll see how this one plays out, but I think this just makes them worse at all skill levels, whereas it was only high skill levels that needed to be targeted. Moving on to Dravidians, pretty simply they're getting a new bonus reducing the wood cost of their siege by 33%. Cheaper siege is of course a nice complement to infantry, and unlike Slavs and Koreans who have similar sounding bonuses, this also includes trebuchets. There's no denying that Dravidians are having a bit of a tough time at the moment in the mid-game, and I think this is a very reasonable way to try to buff them, though it does make them feel like more of an infantry and siege civilization than the skirmisher and elephant archer identity they were originally going with, whether you think that's a good thing or not. Next up, for Ethiopians, they have two major changes. The first is their team's outposts are now going to have their stone cost removed, in addition to the extra line of sight. This is a pretty decent improvement, as it means early outposts are much more useful and won't create issues with adding extra town centers later, and by the late game those extra outposts will give you massive vision on the map. Their second change is their unique tech Royal Heirs is now just given for free to elite Shotel warriors. And instead, the unique tech now gives camels and Shotel warriors 3 resistance to mounted units, meaning everything from knights to cavalry archers. This actually gives a nice complement or alternative to making your own archers against cavalry civs, as your camels are suddenly a threat, even if they are missing bloodlines and some final armor. Moving on to the Goths, this is an intriguing one, as in addition to their regular bonuses against boar and carrying hunt, that bonus is now being expanded to also make your hunt last 20% longer. Longer lasting boar and deer means Goths don't need to farm as early now, and those are also fast food sources, meaning you'll be collecting at that higher rate for longer. Given Goths are having a bit of a rough time on open maps and are just kind of slow out of the gate, I think this is a well-targeted bonus. Moving on to Gurjars, just a couple of cost changes here, with the Shirvanshah riders going up from 20 to 30 gold, in addition to 70 food. And the unique tech discounting military unit costs is also going up significantly in both its food cost and a little in its gold. While these feel like relatively small changes, I think that's the best way to approach it, as Gurjars are still strong, but nowhere near as dominant as they were before. Moving on now to the Incas, another pretty big change here is they get a new bonus, giving them discounted military units food costs, staggered from -15% all the way up to -30%. There's a few moving parts to this one, as slingers and Kamyuks received a boost to their food cost to offset this, and supplies is gone for the militia line. So the obvious outright beneficiaries are skirmishers and the spear line, essentially just helping you with your counter units as well as your militia rush. Remember, Eagle Warriors were also made a bit more expensive in this patch, so they come out pretty much the same. Another Inca change was that Andy and Sling now also give slingers +1 attack, making them a bit more well-rounded, especially in the late game. And maybe most fun, their team bonus was changed from more line of sight on spears and skirmishers to everyone getting a free llama at the start of the game, which is actually a really strong team bonus. Next up, just a quick one for the Koreans, their elite turtle ships range is increasing from 6 to 7, bringing them a little closer to the galleon, though they still don't benefit from archery range upgrades. Moving on to the Lithuanians, their extra 150 food bonus at the start of the game is changing to just +100, so a bit of an early nerf. But each additional town center you build also gives another 100 food. In a situation where you're booming on multiple town centers, this might actually end up being a decent buff to the mid-game, as while you're down 50 food early slowing down feudal aggression, you could easily get an extra 200 or 300, or sometimes even more later on. It seems like a good compromise to target their early game without feeling like the Civ got more boring. And in my opinion, this is a much better way to handle things than what was done to the Chinese. Next up, from Malay, they get a new Civ bonus, giving their infantry free armor upgrades. This one's pretty straightforward and is a nice boost for everything from early men-at-arms to transitioning into their goldless two-handed swordsman, which remember can also get an extra 1 pierce armor now from Gambesons. Moving on to the Malians, I feel like this bonus has been changed a few times, but their 30% longer lasting gold miners is now replaced with 15% more gold dropped off. This ends up being functionally a blend of 15% longer lasting gold, as your gold mines give more than their usual amount, but combined with 15% faster working gold miners, as for every 100 they mine, they drop off 115. In addition, their Gambesons is also gaining extra HP, which is a big deal when you're starting from 35 or 40 as your baseline. Next up for the Portuguese, their organ gun is getting a pretty major overhaul. Essentially, its main projectile is becoming much weaker, but the secondary projectiles around it are being buffed. This is a pretty big deal against anything with relatively high pierce armor, like a paladin, siege unit, or building. In many cases, this is probably a nerf, but Portuguese have been doing very well since their forgers generating wood bonus was added, with maybe surprisingly the highest win rate on Arena in 2023 so far leading up to this. Moving on to the Sicilians, it wouldn't be a complete patch without at least some Sicilian nerfs. First of all, their castles are no longer being created in half the usual time, and now they're just being built 50% faster, or about 2/3 the usual time. The unique tech First Crusade is also being made slightly cheaper overall, but is dropping from 7 sergeants per town center to just 5. On the flip side, sergeant HP is going up by 5 in feudal age and 10 in castle age, so you're at least getting tankier units, even if you're getting fewer of them. They're also getting some direct buffs, with the Elite Sergeant upgrade cost being dropped, and Donjons now being affected by hoardings for some late game extra HP. Maybe most interesting is Donjons can also now create spearline units. Whether all of this together makes them better or not is hard to say, but Donjons and Sergeants are definitely being pushed a lot more, while their castle drops in First Crusade are noticeably weaker. Next up for the Slavs, we have just a couple of small things here, in that they're getting Gambesons for free, which remember increases the militia line's pierce armor and is on top of getting free supplies already. Notably, their Drusian tech is also 300 food cheaper, so collectively your Slav champions are just easier to get to and have more pierce armor, so they come out looking a lot better. Adding on to that, their Boyar's cost is also changed a bit, going from 50 food and 80 gold to something much more like a knight. Moving on to Spanish, they have some very notable changes. The first is their non-elite conquistador loses 1 pierce armor, obviously to hold them back a bit in Castle Age. The unique tech Inquisition is also being tweaked slightly, and in addition to giving faster creation times, now gives missionaries +1 range, now having just 1 less range in total than the regular monk. In my opinion, most radically though, they're getting a new civ bonus, where they receive 20 gold for every tech researched, including eco and military techs. That's kind of a big deal, especially when their blacksmith techs already cost just food, and there's so many things like loom, double bit axe, and horse collar where you'd be getting those techs anyway. A quick count considering the Spanish very wide tech tree shows this could easily add up to 500 gold or more throughout the game. And finally, for the Vikings, they're getting 2 major changes to their unique techs. First of all, Chieftains, in addition to giving infantry more attack against cavalry, now generates gold when infantry units kill villagers, trade carts, or monks. This is very on brand for Vikings, and while killing trade carts with infantry sounds kind of hard, Berserks just got a lot more scary when raiding, and the cost of the tech also came down from 700 food 500 gold to 600 food 450 gold. Their other unique tech Berserker Gang is also gone, or more accurately, it's just given for free to all Berserks starting in Castle Age, and instead their new unique tech gives +1 attack to the archer line and longbows, making their late game arbalesters better in some situations than they were with Thumbring. They're basically more of an infantry, archer, and naval civ all at once, and I'm not sure what Vikings did to deserve all of these buffs, but their super late game is dramatically better in basically every way. Of course, they also get Gambesons for their militia line, on top of more HP and their bonus against cavalry. So that's just some of the highlights from the upcoming patch, which will probably go live in the next couple of weeks. For the most part, I really like the changes, and we didn't even cover a lot of the small details as I tried to stay big picture, but safe to say it's massive and will almost feel like a brand new game for the first couple weeks. Now while for the most part I did like the changes, there's a few I'm not 100% sold on yet, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think, as basically whichever civilization you main, you probably got something. Even my beloved Japanese got a 300 resource discount on their Catapuruto tech, so overall I'm a happy camper. That'll do it for this one though. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.